So last time we made a little note to talk. We've been talking a lot about nutrition lately, which I think is good. These talks are way more interesting when we're talking about nutrition and other things. But
what else can we talk about?
Exercise, yada. So, all right. So there's lots of different like diets out there or diet camps. Right?
Strategies. We like to call them
that's probably a much better word. Much better word.
We like to call them strategies here at Functional Fitness.
Right, because they're a strategy to help you accomplish a goal. And that goal might be optimal health. That goal might be weight loss. That goal might be putting on muscle. That goal might be, I don't have a goal and I just want to eat whatever I want.
Okay, so I think strategy is important because diet comes with so much culture and so much stigmatism behind it.
And there's typically an endpoint. And diet is like, I'm going to do a diet and then I'm done, and then I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing before.
Yes, and then gain back all the weight plus 5 more pounds that I lost. So we're looking at strategies that can be used long-term or short-term to get the results that you're looking for and modifying them based on what is successful. So right now we're doing a carb strategy for our challenge. And you can actually, each week you have a different strategy and you can actually see how your body responds to each carb strategy to find out which one's working or works the best for you if your goal is weight loss.
Right, because remember with weight loss, like we have to obey the law of thermodynamics where there's intake and output type of thing, right? So we have to basically output, and that's energy, that's like workouts, that's metabolism, that's thermic effective eating, that's non-activity thermogenesis. Yeah. And so like that's our output, right? And our input is calories, foods that we eat. And so we have to be burning more than we're intaking. But then it's like really convoluted and complicated in that if our body doesn't feel like it's going to change our hormones to make us hungrier and like all these other things that influence those two things. So there's lots of influences on these, but at the end of the day, we have to burn more than what we intake, right? Like that's just
that's the end. So I think a lot of times we bring other things into that, like use them, like our hormones as an excuse or this or that, but like
those are influences. Like, so we don't discredit them. They
are not the end all be all. Like if you're not over consuming a ton of calories, you are going to start to lose weight.
Right. It happens. It doesn't matter if you're eating carbs or eating protein or whatever. Like at the end of the day, it's calories. But there's certain strategies that work better than others to help manage hunger, manage lots of other things. And so like the most basic strategy that we give to most people that want to lose weight is increasing your protein intake. So trying to make sure that you're hitting protein numbers because that's really important for satiation, muscle retention, and all those good things. That's a lot of times where we'll start is protein. Whole foods, vegetable intake, move that up, bump that up, more fiber, more water, more all of those good micronutrients. Awesome.
The beginning is really the addition of food. It's not the elimination of anything. And I think that's like really, really important. The goal is to eat more of the stuff that you should. And you don't feel like you have to remove anything. This is also a more like, it's not an all or nothing. It's very much moderation as well.
And that tendency or that strategy helps us to kind of move out the things that maybe aren't supporting us as much. So once we're kind of doing those things well, then a lot of times we look at carbohydrates. Some people are more carb sensitive, other people are not. Like I can eat carbs all day long, and I'm probably not going to, overeat or gain a lot of weight, anything like that, because I can handle a lot of calories and I can handle a lot of carbohydrates because I've spent a large portion of my life training to be an elite athlete.
Does anyone feel like he's just rubbing this in their face right now?
I'm gonna rub it all over your face right now, right? And so, like, that's just like that's my genetics, right? I have small bone structure, very small wrists, okay, compared to other people, and so I have very small ankles. And so, let me see. So your wrists are not that much smaller than mine,
and I'm more than a foot shorter than he is, just so you guys know.
So I have a smaller bone structure, which typically means I can handle sugars and carbs better. It's called an ectomorphic body type.
Which body type are you going to put me in?
You're probably like a meso. You're in the middle. So ectomorphic are typically what you would consider like runners. because they're typically more slender. They can typically handle carbohydrates better, better insulin sensitivity. They have a harder time putting on muscle. They sometimes have higher metabolism, but you combine that, so that's the starting point, and then you spend, I don't know, 15 years, 10 to 15 years of like training to be at the highest level that is possible of sport. So that means practices for 2 hours a day. That means weight training sessions 4 to 5 days a week. That means skill sessions every day. And so we're looking at like 3 to 5 hours of exercise like most days of the week. So now we combine that base to where we're at now, and so my diet can look a lot different than someone else, and maybe I don't put on weight like someone else would because of all of that, right? And so I think context is really important whenever we're thinking about this, where if you spent most of your life as maybe a non-athlete and now you work a desk job, like we have to be really conscious about intake because like you're probably not very insulin sensitive, you don't handle carbohydrates very well, maybe your muscle mass is dropped, like, and so your metabolism is a little bit lower. So like these are all things we have to take into account, which helps us think about a strategy. So because of all that, we look at carbs, right? And for someone like myself, I could typically handle more carbs. Where someone that is more what we call an endomorphic body type, think about like alignment in football, or think of like a shot put or a discus thrower, or someone that's just naturally bigger, they're bigger boned. Like literally their bone structure is bigger, right? They don't handle carbs as well. They would do better on a higher fat, higher protein diet. And so then we start manipulating carbs, and then we can look at other fun strategies once you've handled that. Like that's like our foundation, right? And then we can start to move into fun things.
So what do you want to talk about fun things today, or are we just doing like strategies?
We can talk some fun stuff. We can talk some fun stuff. So fun things would then be maybe moving into like something we're doing now with our challenges, carb cycling, right? Where we manipulate that specific macronutrient. Another one might be like intermittent fasting, which is kind of all the rage right now.
Keto would be another one.
Ketogenic diet.
Is also all the rage right now.
Keto is all the rage, right? Bulletproof coffee, absolutely put some butter in my coffee.
I'm not going to put butter in my coffee either.
I love butter as much as the next guy, but I don't need butter in my coffee.
Do you put anything in your coffee?
No, straight black.
Okay.
Black coffee. No, I don't.
Were you thinking about it?
Oh, well, I was like, well, MCTs, but I don't really do it. So.
Sometimes, like, I go through phases with stuff in my coffee. I was never a coffee drinker. I used to just, so I needed it with a bunch of stuff. Now, when you make good coffee, you can drink it black. It's a trick. But I'm a coconut milk in my coffee kind of person, and I measure it.
Which I think is important, because you can go a little excited. You can get
real crazy with coconut milk.
And that's going to add a lot of calories.
A ton of calories. But like Trevor said, that he's a little more carb tolerant. I am not as carb tolerant, so more fats is a little bit better. So
let's unpack some of these special strategies.
Okay.
So do you practice any special strategies or that work for you? Or not really?
Have I practiced them?
No, like on a consistent basis. Are there any?
I have practiced all of them. The trick is almost all of them work if you follow them and you do
every
them.
Single one.
They all work if
Low
you
carb,
do them.
high carb.
I don't do I don't feel as well if I'm on a higher carb diet and lower fat. I just don't feel. I crash a little bit easier. I feel like I mid-afternoon want to snap. Like I notice stuff like that when I'm higher carb.
Yeah.
But I do better. I've done better on like keto or just a lower carb. So keto usually to me is around 20 grams of carbs in a day.
What's the difference between keto and Atkins? So Atkins was all the rage for a while.
It's like the same thing.
Well, what's the differences? There's differences.
Like what differences are you looking for? I never know where he's going with this stuff.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people put keto and Atkins in kind of the same thing, which they're pretty close. Yeah. But Atkins is probably a little bit higher protein. Where if you're truly doing a ketogenic diet, it's actually like a moderate protein diet, but it's a much higher fat diet. And really ketogenic is all about your body producing ketones, which is an alternative energy source rather than glucose. And ketones are produced as fats go through basically through the Krebs cycle in order to kind of bump out ketones.
But I think like really truly the people that do keto really well and like, because you want metabolic diversity. Like you want your only teaching your body how to use fat for energy isn't like you're going to need carbs. And if you're not consuming enough, you won't have that. So I like to keto with carb cycling involved. So I would have I would keto, but I don't keep like 20 grams. I'm usually more 50 grams of.
And that's actually it's different for people.
Carbs, and I can.
If you're testing, you can figure out
I can
what
be a little higher if I'm
is.
training.
Right.
If I'm training, I can higher carb and stay keto. But then after 2 or 3 weeks, I would do a carb cycling week where I would eat more carbs. Mm-hmm. And eating more carbs means having fruit at every meal.
Right.
Because
if you are truly keto,
you're not eating any fruit.
It's protein and it's vegetables, and it's probably not even all vegetables. You're probably eliminating carrots and squashes and
you can get away with a little bit depending on how much you consume. And quantity wise, how much are you going to eat? It really does come into if you're doing a strategy, you have to measure to manage. If you're not measuring, you don't really have any idea. So if you're doing keto, are you doing the blood testing to see what your ketone levels are?
You at least need to do it for a period of time until you understand what it feels like.
Exactly.
Because you'll know after someone has done it for maybe a month, they kind of understand hey, I know that I'm in, I know that I'm at 5 millimoles of ketone or whatever.
And you can, for keto, you can pee on a stick and do it, but after you've done keto for a long time, it's not an effective measurement. So after the first month.
They have acetone readers now too that you can breathe into. I haven't researched them enough, but that's, I think, another strategy if you're not going to do this.
I have the Keto Mojo. I ordered it on the Amazon.
And is that the thing you blow into?
No, it's the blood.
Why don't you do it with Precision Extra? I didn't know.
No, I didn't.
Precision Extra is probably the most common one out there. But the reason a lot of people didn't do it is because it's stupid expensive for the strips. But I think they're coming down.
They are coming down. Keto Mojo takes blood sugar too.
Oh, that's nice.
That's why. I didn't compare them, but the Keto Mojo I have takes blood sugar and ketones.
Nice. On the same strip?
Different strip.
Okay. So that's super interesting. But again, you kind of have to earn the right to do some of this stuff and do the other things first, and then you earn the right to then level up to do the.
If you can't remove add in having enough protein and you can't do those simple things, anything that's more advanced is just going to be more on your plate that you can't manage. So it's really about being successful with whatever you do and following through with it. And
it might work for a week or two, but then things get in the way, and you really haven't developed a good enough base and understanding in order to move to the next level. So it's like trying to tackle algebra before you can do addition and subtraction, right? And so there's certain prerequisites that need to happen in order for us to move to that next level. And be able to do it long term, because at the end of the day, we want this metabolic flexibility type thing that Ashley talked about. Our body should be able to, if I don't have food, I can shift into more of a ketosis type state where I'm producing ketones that are augmenting glucose as an energy source. But then when I have other carbs in my diet, I'm then handling that glucose well and driving it into cells and all that kind of stuff. Personally, for me, I practice intermittent fasting on a pretty regular basis. The weekends, maybe not as much. I'll eat breakfast, but for me, going 18 hours without eating is just kind of fits better with my schedule, and I think allows me to keep consumption a little bit more in check. But then, if I'm looking to gain weight or do things like that, that probably wouldn't be the best strategy because I just couldn't get enough calories in that time frame, right? So whenever we restrict our eating to a time frame, again, there's nothing magical about this, right? It's just, now I'm eating in an 8-hour window, so it's just hard to eat more in that 8-hour window versus if I give myself 16 hours.
But you could even eat in a 10-hour window, which a lot of people do. So a lot of people, when they're doing intermittent fasting, some of us do a variation of that normally, because if you eat breakfast at 8 and you eat supper at 5, you've eaten in a 10-hour window. So technically, you're still fasting 14 hours.
Right. I would encourage someone to
shorten
that up.
But it still is. It is still considered
and
it's a progression. I wouldn't just, if you're eating every hour that you're awake, I wouldn't just all of a sudden stop eating that many hours a day.
Right. And so, I think a big thing is we've been brainwashed as an industry to an extent that we need to eat every 2 or 3 hours to try and keep our blood sugar levels stable and to keep our fat burning furnace going. That was kind of the big rage all the while. Every 2 to 3 hours, stoke that furnace, right? Which isn't necessarily the
But
case.
some people do better eating 4 times a day. for smaller meals, and I've made that recommendation individually to different people. That's why when you ask questions, I don't always answer them when a bunch of people are around, because what I'm going to tell you is going to be very different than what I might be telling the person next to you.
So it depends is usually the answer, and it depends on a lot of different things, like your circumstances. Personally, for me, I would rather slam a hammer into my foot than try to eat 6 times every day.
Oh my gosh, I remember doing it. It was terrible. I used to have alarms that went off. So when I was bodybuilding, that's how I was eating. It was terrible.
So, I mean...
And no one wants to eat reheated tilapia.
Yeah, different strokes for different folks.
We do have a question, though.
Ooh,
so, but if those drinks, like a clear protein with no calorie that does contain sucralose, cause me to consume more water daily, and I'm keeping my eating in check, could the pros outweigh the cons? How does a drink that have protein in it be 0 calories?
So like, let's unpack that a little bit. So all right, so we're gonna just like put a pause. We're gonna go back to artificial sweeteners for a second. So first thing is, if it has protein in it, it has calories in it, because protein is a caloric source. You're probably like 0 sugar is most likely what the question is more about.
Okay.
Like ultimately, you just have to like make the decision. Like I don't do it because it like I choose not to eat artificial sweeteners, not because I might overconsume other things later. I would rather not disrupt my gut bacteria based on everything else in my life that's probably disrupting my gut bacteria, and so I don't want to just add another thing to that. So my reasons may be different than someone else's.
And I am a firm believer that it's your line in the sand. Draw it wherever you choose. If you feel like it's beneficial for you, then go for it. But for the sake of the challenge, you cannot have it unless you're going to mark no. Like in the challenge, the answer is no. Right. In your life, it's really your choice, and like where Trevor and I draw our lines in the sand with food and ingredients in them is very different than where other people are. That's why I don't tell, like I predominantly eat gluten-free, but I don't tell everyone else they need to do it. Unless I notice you're having a problem every time you like your food and you eat a piece of bread and then you have some kind of gut thing, and I'm like, maybe you should stop eating it for a period.
Right, and so when we say draw a line in the sand, I'm not of like that I can't ever have it. It's just like my lines are ways to do it less, right? Like ways to just consume it less frequently. And for me personally, like, I don't know, like even if it is kind of questionable, like, oh, maybe it is good for you. Cool, like I can find alternatives that I'm just as happy with. Yeah, I have to work a little bit harder to figure out good alternatives, but like there are alternatives out there. And so, like, I'm just going to choose that instead.
My lines in the sand are just about my house. I don't bring stuff like that into my own house, but I also have found that I can only be the ridiculous person eating at someone else's house so many times before I'm like, you know what? If this is what's for dinner, I'm just going to have it, and it'll be okay.
Right.
Or I can choose, like, if it's lasagna and there's salad, maybe I go really, really heavy on the salad. And I have some lasagna, but I don't have a bunch of it. Like,
right.
Just to gauge how I'm going to feel later.
And I think that's important from a mental standpoint of not classifying everything as black and white. Because I think when we classify things as black and white, that is setting stage for mental kind of issues down the road and food issues down the road. And so that idea of being flexible mentally, I think, is a really important skill. And I say skill because like you have to kind of work at it and notice your patterns and notice maybe, hey, I'm maybe restricting a little too much. I'm kind of falling into that camp, or I get really anxious when I'm eating out. Like I think these are all good signs that maybe we've gone a little bit too far to one end, and just kind of coming to grips a little bit with those feelings that we're having, and understanding that like we don't have to be all or nothing. All or nothing is not going to probably help us be successful long term. I think periods of all or nothing are good because they help push us into that next stratosphere and in that next level. But living our lives like that on a consistent day-to-day basis is just a recipe for like
misery,
being a hermit, right?
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that's really hard. Like I see people saying like, I'm afraid to go out to eat or do anything. Who no one wants to live there. So like if you're thinking you want to lose like the last 5 pounds, but that means like you can't socialize and do anything fun. Do you really want to lose the last 5 pounds?
Right. Is it worth it? So Precision Nutrition did a really good article. It's called The Cost of Getting Lean. You can just Google that if you want to look into it. But it's like the cost of getting like uber lean. Like if you want to get into, for a male, single digit body fat numbers, like your diet has to be pretty tight if you don't have like if you didn't win the genetic lottery, right? I won part of the lottery.
His wife won the other part, just so you
But,
guys know.
like,
They won that together.
and so there is a cost to getting lean, and it typically is a compliance to eating, and so it's finding what works for you, right? What works for you and where you feel like your percentage needs to be, and that can change too. Like certain times of the year, like hey, in the winter, I may let things slip a little bit, or I may loosen things up a little bit because like I'm not going to be hanging out with my shirt off. But then in the summer, I might want to tighten things up right before the summer comes to be able to flex those muscles on the beach.